do you think was the most important product decisions you were involved in that had, I don't know, that had biggest influence on the business?
At Zappos?
Yes.
For example. Okay, I'll tell you about the biggest one I made. The biggest decision I made that actually was, in retrospect, probably one of the costliest in a bad way. Then I'll talk about the good ones. Good one. It's not bad. When we were trying to reduce our marketing costs, I was heading up the marketing team for a while. Someone on the team had an idea to get aggressive in our paid search marketing, turn off our affiliate marketing, and we'd see the affiliate folks, right, who are up here, start moving down, and we'd start moving up because we'd be better at bidding on the same terms. So I was like, okay, sounds great, sounds awesome, it's logical. So we flipped the switch, turned it off, and lost millions in a matter of a month. But what we did is we took that mistake and we learned about what to do, what not to do, and how to do things better in the future. Now, I actually do consider that part of the experience, because when people are searching for your product on Google, that's part of your experience, believe it or not. What happens with the result, learned about what to do, what not to do, and how to do things better in the future. Now, I actually do consider that part of the experience, because when people are searching for your product on Google, that's part of your experience, believe it or not. What happens with the results is part of your experience. So, it may not be a direct answer, but there's some other things that we did that were pretty impactful. There's some obvious things. Like once we started focusing on standardizations on call to actions, we started seeing less bounces instantly. When we started treating, when we started being really regimented around using colors in very, very specific and regimented ways, we started seeing better patterns of usage. And these are basics, but believe it or not, these basics are sometimes hard to apply in an organization that has marketing people and merchandising folks who all want to get their initiatives in there and create this glorious flash experience because brand X thinks it's awesome to have some fancy model running across the screen when in fact the user doesn't care about it. But I would say probably the number one single most impactful decision would be when in 2008 we recognized the strength of 2007 recognized the strength of our brand and decided to shift our focus towards rapidly evolving the site is a phased approach to a redesign. The Zappos you see now is definitely not the best thing out there, but it's a complete 180 from what was up there a few years ago. But we would never flip the switch in a redesign, and I think user experiences on websites need to evolve, don't need to change. I think design is a verb, not a noun, and I think it's everything you do from a UX perspective needs to be an evolution. And I think that to me is the best thing we did. You saw that purple thing, that website. I'm gonna pull it up again. Let's see if this works. It's working. It's working. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit specific here. I'm not sure if you can see it, but this site was optimized for 800 by 600. It was really thin. It had this terrible purple background. It had really high contrast, and we made a simple decision on the first iteration of the redesign that all we did was widen the page. And then what we did is we took the top navigation, didn't change the structure, but just changed the aesthetic of it very slightly. Then we changed the structure, and then we started introducing elements to just the product detail page and started changing this because it wasn't about findability once you landed here, it was about completing an action. And once we worked from here, from the middle of the site, and then spread out from the middle, both forward and backwards almost simultaneously, as opposed to starting on the homepage, because I don't think for big commerce sites, homepage is the most important thing. So really I would say it's about a tactical approach to a redesign. It's not one specific action.
What are some sites, apps, or products that you think have the most incredible user experience that maybe have inspired what you guys did at Zappos or other sites that you're working on?
I probably have a different answer for currently versus in the past. It's easier to answer probably currently. I would say that to me right now what's really important is good copy and good content strategy. And when I see sites that make me smile and laugh, or experiences that make me smile and laugh, I get really inspired by it. So, to me, wow, it's a good question. For the simple fact of what Instagram does, I would say that's actually pretty inspiring to me. It's something that totally simplified how I take photos, and that's something I think about when creating anything, is how could I give you one interesting thing at a time, as opposed to here's everything now, figure your way through it. That's actually been inspiring. And it's an easy one to point at because it's so hot and popular right now, but when you really think about what they're doing, it's like, it's ridiculously simple. What they do, you could do on Hipstamatic, you could arguably do in most places with a little bit of finagling, right, and knowing some filtering, but they don't even let you share other people's photos. They only let you share your photo. They'll only show you one thing at a time, and it's all about just making you, most folks who are probably not good photographers, I don't mean in this room in general, an opportunity to feel like a professional photographer. So if we can give people opportunities to make them feel special, then that's great, and that's probably one of my bigger sources of inspiration. I'm drawing a blank on other ones, to be honest, so that's okay.
The redesign was done by Applicake, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
So what was your role during the redesign? You were more like a client, or working side by side with people?
I'll explain what the relationship for the redesign was for real. I shouldn't say for real. Applicake definitely was involved. What they came in at a later stage once we evolved the overarching site structure. So in the course of about a year and a half, we were working with Adaptive Path. The Adaptive Path is part of this, basically the unsung hero here. We had a user experience team of fabulous folks, but what we realized really quickly when it was time to rapidly evolve the site is that we couldn't handle a redesign, an evolution by ourselves. So we enlisted Applicake to help keep the team inspired, motivated, and act as facilitators to the right experience discussions, meetings, and they were helping us sort through our thought process. So Adaptive Path wasn't necessarily rolling up their sleeves and doing the wireframing, but they were helping us to solve the problems. So now once we re-architected the site, once we knew where we were headed, we then were on the hunt for a site that could help, a company that could help us rebrand. So we'd have, together with Applicake, we came up with a design style guide, and Applicake responsibility. I mean, they, of course, they're amazing, and I admire them. They're probably one of my favorite companies out there. But they skinned the site. They helped create a new identity. They didn't work on all the things that make the site what it is. They technically search, navigational structures, taxonomies. So the visual layer, we were in partnership with Applicake. They were the ones who were ultimately rolling up their sleeves, coming up with the style guide, which was all implemented by our internal design team. And I actually think external perspectives are almost always necessary. I wouldn't rely on ever giving your product blindly to another company to do, but if you can find partnerships with the right companies who can help you think differently, then I think you have a better chance of success. But I shy away from basically hiring an agency and say, here's our stuff. Here, come do some interviews and come back in 4 weeks and tell us what this thing should look like. I don't think that works.
How often did you check what works in terms of redesign? Because you guys probably had a lot of ideas how to improve your site, and how often did you check it?
You check it as in with our customers and
some kind of audits or something like that.
Yeah. Well, our first, the first thing I remember vividly was getting entire internal company buy-in, so that every single majority of employees felt comfortable that we were doing, that we wanted to create something that resonated with what they thought the brand should be. So once we got to that point, let's call it maybe 2 or 3 design options. It was a matter of doing small usability groups here and there. And so when I say small, I'm not saying we didn't have a research studio that we got hundreds and hundreds of users in. We got some in, and we would probably maybe monthly have some users in looking at some things, giving us some feedback. But the one thing you have to remember that's really unique about Zappos is there was up to 6,000 phone calls a day, and those conversations with our customers is where we got nearly all of our feedback. And if you were to kind of go to the site today, and depending on what test groups you're in, you'll see very blatantly, whenever there's a new feature, there's a thing that says feedback. And you can click on it and give your feedback. So we'll call out new features, and we rely on getting that sort of stuff in real time. But most importantly, it's those phone calls with the customers. So we were at an advantage there, having 6,000 conversations, probably more now. So I would say in that respect, it was often. But it was a byproduct of something that already existed. And that's where it's glorious. It wound up being really cheap. What do you think?
It was adopted in your DNA.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about gamification in terms of designing the experiences, or does it help, or?
So I am in the process of forming an opinion on that. As everyone here will know. I think creating addictive products is important. I think if what you're relying on is purely gamification, then my knee-jerk reaction is that it's just a game, But I do think the notion of game mechanics is important and doesn't necessarily need to be relegated to badges or points, but to something that is competitive by nature. So let me give a real-world example. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Gilt Groupe. Gilt Groupe is a flash sales site in the States. That's where I worked before I came here. I'll just explain it. So flash sales, basically, we have a limited amount of products. Let's just, for the sake of conversation, say we had 100 of one item, really, really awesome item. At noon, at 12 o'clock, it goes on sale, and at a really discounted price. So at 12 o'clock, thousands of customers will go in, try to buy it, and we give them 10 minutes at most to have an item in the shopping cart, or they lose it, and the next person gets it. So there was never this customer-to-customer competition. Like, no one knew who the other customers were, but it was a game by nature. It was a competition by nature because we presented scarcity in such a way that encouraged people to act quickly. So, but they never saw an avatar of someone else. They never saw a point. They just know that they got in quickly and got that product before the sold out sign came there. In that respect, I think gamification is wonderful. It doesn't have to mean create literally a game out of it. I think if you could spin it the right way, I believe in it. But beyond that, I'm forming an opinion because I haven't much experience in that. It's in the product that we're trying to develop now, and we're having avid discussions around that. But the belief is, in my mind, is that if it's just a game, then it's just a game. You need to have that content that keeps people coming back. Have you? There's a product that's growing in popularity in the U.S. called Turntable FM. It's blocked outside of the States now because of music copyright laws. But they introduced a really interesting game mechanic where it's a collaborative DJ room, right? And you can, everyone can join. Anyone can create a room and join the room. You go into the room, and if you play interesting music and the crowd likes it, you get points. If the crowd doesn't like it, you don't get points. But at the same time, you're serving a very important specific need. Be introduced to new music, to have a little bit of fun, but without that music component, it's a game like anything else.
What was reaction to a new design by your customers? I mean, I'm interested in what did you guys do to people who didn't like the new design? What was your approach to that?
Yeah, always responding. I mean, if we got a bad comment and response, we never left them unattended. If we could satisfy the overwhelming majority of masses, I think that's successful. But I think at the end of the day, a response is the most important thing you can give to your customer, and that's what we did. But we did take the feedback seriously, and the one-off comments are hard to satisfy. But if we saw a pattern in feedback, we would always react to it. But just to repeat myself, respond. I don't know. I mean, I can think of countless times of giving feedback to companies and never hearing back, and that's a bad experience. So, that's how I would.
And your decisions, because you said 6,000 phone calls maybe month or day, and how you decided which feature is going to be next? Because from the 6,000 people, a person can have their own idea. So
actually, how did you gather that?
It was pure data. I don't know.
No, I think creating the roadmap and figuring out what's next was probably where the instinct layer came in. You know, I mean, you know, with all the layers that exist, and feedback being one of them, constant contact being one of them, you know, you have an instinct. And I would say when you're prioritizing a roadmap, you do your best to trust your gut, trust your past experiences, and have the data impact it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's basically how I did it. I would say Zappos, you know, we were probably more on the qualitative side when it came to research as a whole. Qualitative as it pertains to research and instinct. I mean, we definitely were analytical by nature, but we didn't make decisions purely by analytics, never.
And actually, how did the decision process look like? Because you said that, for instance, you lost a lot of money by one decision.
Yeah.
So did you have like did you have your own independence in taking your decisions, or you had to tell your like the
Yeah. You know, it's not a place where you have to run all decisions up the ladder, but anybody who would have a direct impact on any decision would have to at least be notified and or have their voice heard. So we did a lot of stakeholder interviews. We talked to a lot of department heads and would try to make intelligent decisions based off of their feedback. But you know, if we were to change, you know, like for example, Tony, the CEO, you know, most of the decisions on the redesign were done over a couple of emails. And he doesn't necessarily need to sit there and pick apart every single decision. And he basically said, okay, yeah, I like this one the best. And if you were to counter him, he's fine with it. But the decision process, you know, by and large was autonomous. You know, Zappos is really good at, you know, allowing folks who have success there to continue to be successful. There's nothing more demoralizing than not being empowered to make a decision. But making decisions in a bubble is not good either. And I learned that lesson really quickly. Hopefully you wanted it. Drink time?
So, because we talked before, and I know that you have several roles at Zappos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I liked what you said is that you were like it wasn't your decision; you were just put in a place you hadn't expected, right?
Yeah.
So, what was the most challenging quote like?
Probably overcoming fear. Role or overcoming emotion? I think.
Role.
Oh, role. Well, clearly the most hardest emotion was fear. Probably heading up the marketing department because
How many people were there
in the department?
in
In the marketing department alone, maybe 20. I'm not sure. And the most I managed at one time. Okay, actually, this is a good thing. At one point, I was in like my line of reporting, which sounds weird for me to even think that there were people in my line of reporting. I mean, I look in the mirror and like I feel like I'm 18 still, and I shouldn't be managing anyone. But there was like 120, and I learned when I was in the marketing, when I was given charge of the marketing department, I freaked out, and I realized maybe within a month and a half. I'm guessing, something like that, that I couldn't do it all because I was overwhelmed and I had too much responsibility. So when I was in the marketing department, I got really scared, not because of marketing, but because of everything that was on my shoulders. And I was able to chill out after a while and make some decisions to relinquish things that I had once other managed. And I learned a lot about myself right then and there, and worked really hard to get my number of reports down from I think it was 119 or 120 down to 10, which I managed to do successfully over the course of the year, and started feeling more and more comfortable. So I don't know if it was the act of marketing or the fact that all of a sudden I had this much impact over people that I didn't feel comfortable having. But making decisions like marketing in paid search, I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And I won't ever do that again.
You mentioned that while designing wireframes or new web page, you had to talk to marketing people.
Yeah.
So how did you talk to them? Or they get strange ideas and make the logo bigger. And do you have any golden sentence for them?
No, I don't have a sentence for them, but I had a strategy which was, and I think it's pretty common, is make every decision feel like someone else's. And so that's basically it. But I think Zappos was fortunate enough to have a relatively aligned organization that, you know, all the crazy things that people would throw out there, I think people knew that we all had to do what we thought was best, and many things wouldn't happen. You know, I guess you know, there were times when moments of weakness where I would get upset or get frustrated because someone would tell me to do something, and it's the most important thing in the world, and you have to do it. And I'd be like, sure, that sounds great, so I'm happy to do that if you give me your buy sheet and let me decide what shoes we should be selling on the site. And all of a sudden, people be like, oh no, that's my job. I'm like, well, exactly. But I attribute those to moments of weakness because I don't think that's a good strategy. But there were moments where I had to do that because I would have moments of breaking down and crying, and that's not good. But now that I think about it, I wish I did that more. Now that I'm out there.
So speaking of dogs, toes in their heads, like how you know you launched to get what you said a month ago, right?
Yeah.
And what did you learn so far? Like,
okay.
It's like, you know, if you have all the data there, like it's a.
I learned that no matter what you call a site, people are still going to put anything they want up there. Seriously. So like, I don't know how to attribute that to a very specific lesson, but I think I feel more strongly that not giving users a blank slate is really, really important. So like one of the things I'm thinking about for dogs to open their heads next, it's not a business strategy, unfortunately, is when people upload a photo, have a minimum degree of tiltage allowed in order to put a photo up. So like if you take a photo, you can there's this technology where you put like 2 dots over the eyes and like a slit over the mouth, and if it's not at least 10 degrees, you can't put a photo up there. So seriously, like I think that's going to help. And it may mean less photos, but it means better photos. So I'd rather strong composition than a broader coverage.
Or you can have a community manager, you delete those.
Yeah, in order to have a community manager, I have to be making money on it to pay that person. Cool.
So don't you think like in introducing the angle measurement will like overcomplicate things? People will be like, are you kidding me?
Maybe.
Then they can also put a photo of a cat between his cats.
Hey, cats tilting their heads somehow. That's a good point. They could.
Llamas.
Hey, I think it's the tilt that's more important than the mammal. Mammals tilting their heads. I just think, tilting your heads are funny. Humans tilting their heads are funny, so we'll see what happens. Cool. Well,
Do you have any more questions? Anyone?
One more
Okay.
about Zappos business model, so I don't know how much you can tell us. But I'm interested in the advantages of Zappos, the returns, telephone, and so on. It's like, in my point of view, it's expensive for the company.
Yeah.
How could you do it? The Polish business people think in the way that they are afraid of customers who will cheat.
yeah.
So
Okay, I'll do everything I can to answer it specifically. We definitely had a marketing department, and they spent money on advertising, they spent money on marketing, but we generally considered the expense of customer service and the expense of returns as a marketing cost. So instead of spending a normal marketing budget, let's, for the argument's sake, say what would normally be spent on marketing, we take 50% of that and say that's going to go towards shipping and that's going to go towards customer service because we believe that was better marketing than any ad or any other types of marketing will do. So I don't know the exact numbers, I don't remember the exact numbers, which is again why I shouldn't have been in the marketing department, but like that was a general philosophy. But we also had straight up in our DNA a belief that for the longevity of the business, not for making money today, but for making money down the road, it was all about getting people to come back. And it's very easy, I think it's very easy to increase sales today. You lower your prices, you run a promotion, but all you're going to get are bargain hunters, people who are not going to be brand loyalists. So brand loyalists make your business, and that was just the belief we had. So it is expensive, but we weren't spending any more as a total marketing budget than the average company whatsoever. We were just spending it more wisely.
So where would you draw a line? Because, you know, you can have customers saying, asking for.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about the part of the
Yeah.
question.
So was there a point where you would say, hey, come on, like this ad is like not legit anymore? Like,
I mean, if there was like people who are, I mean, the average person returned things many times. That's not a problem. If you were abusing it by sending back, shoes that a dog chewed up 5 times, that's problematic. We would always take back things once, but there were times where people just were not allowed to return anymore. But generally speaking, yeah, people abuse the system, but it's actually a pretty small number.
So I think I read somewhere that maybe right now it's going to be more of a problem when Zappos is moving into like the clothing business more, because maybe it's more difficult with shoes.
Yeah.
But actually, like around 10% of clothing returns account for what's called wardrobing. So actually, when you buy stuff, you keep the tag, the price tag, and then you just, go to a party with a,
I heard about that.
Yeah. So like 10%, and it's, like, I know, I learned it from a reliable source. Well, it's an inside joke actually, but it's like, do you think that's going to be a bigger problem? Was that?
That's a good question.
No, like 10%. It's not like the small number of people abusing the site. It's actually also, it's not like you're personally going to a shop and like you're lying in somebody's eyes, like telling, I don't worry, like it was just too small or whatever. Like you're actually like sending it via mail. You never see people. You don't give a shit.
I only had a good year and a half overlap with clothing business at Zappos, so I'll do my best to answer it with my opinion, and that is, I know for a fact actually that if that number 10% is true, that's still only a subset of overall clothing returns. Mm-hmm. So you could almost equate it to a percentage of folks who were sending back damaged shoes. It's a small percent. Mm-hmm. But I actually think it's part of the cost of doing business, and I know when Zappos got into clothing, things like that are considered. Mm-hmm. I just don't know the ultimate specifics of it. I do recall the clothing return percent being approximately the same as shoes. I think the markup's higher in clothing, so I think it's possibly a more profitable business, but I'm not positive. I do know it's about 4 times the size of a business than that of shoes. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the notion of returning again as a mechanism to get people to be loyal, it's not a bad thing, because there's positive word of mouth that gets associated with that. But beyond that, I don't know.
On an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I have a question about the vegetarian shoes that you have.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's the wrong words for a type of product that we continually got dinged on. It's basically, it was supposed to be products that didn't contain like animal byproducts. But I've learned that it's the wrong term. But people would search for, you would see people searching for vegetarian shoes, vegan shoes, and things of that nature. But it's just stuff that isn't human leather, supposedly.
Kosher.
Kosher.
Any more questions? Oh, okay, I guess we will be going to battle if anyone is interested in joining for beer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you.